Buenos dia, and welcome to Cafecito Tempranito con Tayrin. We have entered a new month celebrating Women's History Month, and I'm so excited to have my first guest, one of my best friends, my sister, my love, my everything, my Aries, Andrea Rosario. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited. Very
Yay!
excited.
So excited to have you on board. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you here is because, last year when we came out when Latinas Evolving came out with the first virtual magazine, I had asked a question in the interview. And one of those questions was related to who was somebody who had inspired these individuals, these women, in their lives. And it was evident that in their answers that the individuals that they were most inspired by were their grandparents. In some way, whether it was either both or one of them, but for the most part, it was evident there was somebody like that in their life. And so I wanted to start off this month with talking about somebody that inspired you in your life, somebody that may have changed the course or the journey for you, that left a legacy that you wanted to continue on with. Um, and so, first, before we go on into that conversation, if you could tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Andrea Rosario. I work in the HR field. I kind of just fell into that field. Actually, I had no intention of
Mhm.
being in the HR realm because it's not easy work. And so, yeah, I fell into that one day because my supervisor said, you know what, I have an opening. I feel like you can be an HR specialist. I was like, sure, I'll try it. And yeah, the rest is history. I kind of just fell into that. And so now I'm currently an HR generalist at a mission called Water Street Mission in Lancaster,
Awesome.
PA. And I've been there now heading on 2 years. And yeah, it's been pretty great. Yeah.
Yay, that's awesome. And I think we both have fallen into kind of the fields that we're in right now, um, just from some kind of experience and so forth, but never really imagined ourselves here. But at the same time, it is a new journey, a new adventure. And we have both been open-minded to that journey and wherever it's going to take us.
Yeah.
Um, so that's pretty cool. And for those of you who do not know, she also sings. She has a beautiful voice.
Oh,
She
Lord.
tries to hide it from everybody, but
I
I
have
let the
thus
world
far.
know. It's no
Yeah, some
hiding
people know.
now.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people at my job know that, but I try to keep it on the low because I'm like, not doing that anymore. But yeah.
So, based off of what we were talking about in regards to somebody that may have inspired you or left a legacy for you, who is that person in your life that you can think off the top of your head of just like, there's just this one person who really changed my life?
That person was always going to be my grandmother, who I was actually named after. Her name was Andrea Padilla. And I don't think she even knew that she was my role model. Obviously, grandparents are not really thinking about their grandchildren or children looking at them as role models, but my grandmother was a big role model in my life. She was a strong woman of faith. She was humble. She was loving. She had such a servant heart. She was really hospitable. Anybody who came to her house was given a plate of food and a good cup of coffee. Like they never left empty handed. And so I think she has been always been a pivotal person in my life that I've always looked back to. And also because I have her name, I always feel like I'm carrying her legacy in some way. And so I
Mm,
try to stay connected to her in that sense where it's like, okay, my grandma was this kind of person. And I really was influenced by her, by how she was so humble and such a woman of faith. And I try to always remember who she was and try to carry on her legacy in that way. And so, yeah, she's always been a special person. Even she passed away in 2001, but I
oh,
still look back after all the years, and I think about the memories and the times that I literally was observing her every move
Hmm.
because she was that inspiring to me. And I just feel like, yeah, she was that person. She was always that person.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm looking to still have one of my grandmothers still alive, from my father's side. And I try to take advantage now, for the little bit of memory that she has left, because she does have Alzheimer's now because she's already 92 years old. And I try to ask her questions that I would have never, that I didn't get the opportunity, first of all, to ask my other grandmother.
Hmm.
Um, because my other grandmother was, I was younger at that time and I didn't think about these things to have these type of conversations with her. Now that this grandmother has lived this long and I'm at more place in my life where I want to know like how she met my grandfather, how did she grow up and things like that. And I'll ask her these things. So I love knowing now stuff that maybe some of my other family members don't know because they don't think to ask
Hmm.
her these things.
The history.
Um, yeah, the history behind it, like how did that come about, because a lot of times it repeats itself, right,
Hmm.
in life. My grandmother from my mom's side had four kids, and she went through some rough
Hmm.
times. um she was actually born during the pandemic of 1918,
Wow.
so she was born in chaos.
Yep. Yep.
um and so it's pretty. I always say, if you have a grandparent that's alive now, always take advantage of really having and asking those questions, because once they're
Hmm.
gone, you have no idea. Then you're dependent
Yep.
on their kids or somebody else to tell you their information. And sometimes
Yep.
that information is not accurate. It's better to get the information straight from
Mhm.
that person.
Yeah, I could say for my grandmother, I know that she had a really tough background. She was in an abusive marriage for a long time. And I mean, this woman even stood by the man's side to the like he was in his deathbed and she was caring for him.
Wow.
I mean, that's how crazy. Like I know for me, like you in an abusive relationship, my first thing was, to think about is to leave, but she literally stood by him the until the moment he passed. And I think too, like for in her time, she didn't have all the resources that women have now. So, like with 8 children, she had to think about what was best for them. And even if it was at that time to be in that kind of terrible relationship, she didn't have anywhere else to go. She didn't have any other resources. She didn't have any other, options for herself. So I think looking at how she went through all of that and then was still able to take care of him on his deathbed, like that's crazy. That's just the kind of woman she was. And I mean, to continue to live through, I mean, talk about resiliency. Like I think my grandmother was really the model of resiliency for our family. That's
Mm,
why she was the big, like the glue for the family. And so yeah, that's tough for women in that time
mm-hmm,
to go through so much and then they still make it work. They push through
mm-hmm,
and they persevere.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's the reason why we are the way we are now today. A
Hmm.
lot of women who saw their grandparents, saw their mothers, saw their great grandparents,
Hmm.
go through the things that they had to go through.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to meet my great grandmother from my father's side.
Yeah.
Um, and I saw my grandmother take care of her mother in that way and go to her house, and I would go with her. I would go with her and help her. And again, when you're younger, you're not thinking about these moments, right? You're not thinking how instrumental and important those moments are.
Hmm.
And I was little and I only remember so much, but I remember going to my grandmother's house, and I mean, yeah, to my grandmother's house and then to visit her mom to take care of her, bring her food, whatever the case was. And now thinking back, I was like, wow, that was literally three generations
Hmm.
in one house.
Yeah.
Um, there's a picture that I recently found, and I've seen this picture multiple times, but it never dawned on me. And it's a picture of me, my mother, and my grandmother
Wow.
together in the picture. And forever, I just look at the picture and I just
Mm-hmm.
liked it because my grandmother is in it and because I'm in it because I'm little, but not thinking about the history there, right? The three
Crazy.
generations of women that come there. And it's like, wow, it's important to value our grandparents, to value that because we really need to be able to have those conversations and be able to move forward. And it helps us too to be able to then change the next steps in our lives, right? To
Mm-hmm.
not to make same mistakes, to change the trajectory of our journey, so that we're not repeating those generational curses,
Right.
um, that come around with that. But
Mm-hmm.
and speaking about that, are there any simple stories maybe that you can reveal of what kind of woman your grandmother was? I know you mentioned that she was humble and she would give so much to everybody, but was there any specific one that maybe stood out to you?
There's many. There's many stories. I think one that comes to mind is my grandmother's house was like the hub for holidays. Christmases were really huge in my
Mm,
grandmother's house. And so everybody, when I say everybody, like family and friends of family, people we didn't know were in this house, and they would just end up there because they knew the kind of hospitality that she had. And so
hmm.
not just that, like people left somehow with a gift. Not being expected. Like she literally bought gifts for people who were just gonna come. Like she knew we were gonna show up. And so she was prepared
Her
for
and I
them.
would have got along great.
Yeah, she was prepared for them. So that was the stuff that she would do. Not only that, I remember one time where there were so many people, like literally back to back person in this house, and we weren't sure we were going to have enough food. And so, my aunts were freaking out. My mom, like, they're all like, oh, we're not going to have enough food. We're going to have to like figure something out. Or, they were like really freaking out. And so my grandmother was the most calmest out of all of them. And I remember her just very silently going to the pot of rice, and she was just praying while she was stirring it, and she just kept praying and praying. And I remember like my aunts, my mom, they were like over like just they couldn't like, oh my gosh, they were just freaking out. And so it ended up that everybody literally was fed that night. We don't know how. We
Wow.
know that her faith, absolutely,
Hmm.
but everybody was fed that night. And we were just looking back, not like years after, like, man, everybody was fed. We were so concerned, but like literally she prayed over the food and everybody was fed that night. It was crazy.
Made it happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So I
beautiful.
mean, yeah, that's just one of many from my grandmother. I mean, there was always something where she would give her the shirt off her back to somebody if she could.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Mm. That's beautiful. Like I can think of many other situations and one of the funny things I can remember from my grandmother is my grandmother definitely was an extrovert. She definitely loved to go do her own things. And I say that I got that from her because my mom is very introverted. So she's the opposite. So she would be the one to tell my grandmother to like stay home and
Mm.
where my grandmother was like, no. And then I'll be the one who wanted to leave with my grandmother. But I love my
Yeah.
grandmother so much that I would want to just always want to leave with her or go somewhere. And she wanted to have her
Mhm.
time. And I remember she would have to literally find a way to escape out the back or something. And I remember we were living in Puerto Rico and she must have said, okay, I'm leaving somewhere. And I must have sensed it because
Mhm.
I went looking for her. And all I remember seeing is her, like, I just seen like her feet, like jumping over the
Trying to escape.
backyard, trying to escape the other way. It's like,
Yep. She's like, let me get out.
I was so mad. I was like, wow, you left me again.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Right.
it's moments like that. Moments that she would always find a way, and this is my grandmother from my mom's side, that
Mm.
she would always find a way to make sure I got nutrition because I was a very picky eater as a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I never wanted to eat anything, but I was always active. I was just out and about, wanted to go with the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I don't know if you ever drank this, but she would make me the Malta. She would take the Malta juice or soda, whatever that's called. She would take that and she would, and now that I think of it, I'm like, bleh, like I could never eat that
I've
or
heard of
drink
it, but
that.
I've never,
She
yeah.
would call it was called a ponche, like a
Mm-hmm.
milkshake is what they would call in Spanish. But it was the Malta drink with an egg in it. She
Yep.
would crack an
Yep.
egg in it and then she would put sugar. Now remind the Malta drink's already sugary as it is. That's
Mm-hmm.
literally corn syrup in your mouth.
Yeah.
Like, so it was literally that with an egg and then sugar mixed in. And I don't think there was anything else. I think that was pretty much it. And I would drink this. I would be like, yes, this is
Mm.
the best thing in the world. And
Yeah, I've
now
never
I'm
had
like,
that.
ugh, oh my God, all that sugar that was in there and all that corn syrup
Ugh,
with
yeah.
a protein of one egg.
I never understood the ponche. I've never had it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't try it now as an adult, but
Mm,
yes, things like that that stay with you about your grandparents.
yeah.
But as we're reflecting on Women's History Month,
Hmm.
and you've shared a few things already, but is there anything that would highlight her strength, and maybe the impact that your grandmother had, celebrating her as a symbol of a woman's resilience? Because in this day and age, we have a lot of women stepping up to the plate.
Hmm.
I find that in the last few years, it seems as though it is a time for us women to step up and take these leadership roles to change things that haven't been changed in the past, to change the course of how things are seen. What the woman has been empowered to do so many things. It was something that I recently, and we'll go back to the question, but this just made me think of it. Devon Franklin
Hmm.
I saw a little clip of him talking about, and he was basically just trying to empower the single woman, not letting society make you feel like you have to be in a relationship in order to be whole.
Hmm.
And he mentions how when Adam came into the world, he came with one rib, right? Because they took a piece, God took his
Hmm.
rib to make the woman. But Eve came in with both ribs. She came in whole.
Hmm.
She didn't need anything. She didn't need anything. So he was empowering the woman to say, you are whole all by yourself.
Hmm.
Stop feeling as though you need to be in a relationship to be
Hmm.
whole. And that was so empowering to me. So empowering that I was just like, wow. To look at, because I've never looked at it in that way, shape, or form. I've never
Hmm.
even thought about it in that way, shape, or form. And it just speaks on the resiliency of those women, right? Because all women have their own versions of being resilient in something, but the
Hmm.
women who are resilient in their singleness, or that are empowered to make those decisions of, I want to be in a relationship, or I am in a relationship, not because I need to be in a relationship, but because this is what I choose to. I want to be with this person because this person is my equal, because this person is a bonus to my life.
Hmm.
Not because they need to be in a relationship in the sense of, oh, I have to be with this person, because
Hmm.
or else I'm gonna be alone forever. Not
Yeah.
for that case. So going back to the question I
Yeah.
diverted into, was there a moment that you can think of when it comes to that the impacts that your grandmother made, that the celebrating that gives her as a symbol of resiliency?
Yeah. Um, I think how she approached her hardships during her time, because again, I think the limited resources, women were viewed very differently than they are now. So I think for her, she did the best that she could in a bad situation. And
Mm,
so I think how she approached her hardship was like one of the key things for her to kind of persevere through it.
mm,
My grandmother prayed as long as I knew her and before that, I know she was a woman of prayer. Like she prayed all the time. And I'm pretty sure there were probably moments in her life during that time where she struggled even to pray through those hardships. But I think how she approached it, she was a very compassionate woman. She was very I don't even know what it was really like for her at that time, but I know it was hard. But for her to approach that kind of hardship and take care of the one who was her abuser, I mean,
mm-hmm.
that like
That's it.
that speaks volumes of like somebody
Mm-hmm.
who's so compassionate to see like I know that you're the way that you are for a reason. And
Mm-hmm.
whatever that reason is, I'm gonna leave that up to God, but I'm gonna do my part. And so I think for
Mm-hmm.
her
Her
resilience
resilience.
is it continues, I think, till today because I saw the kind of woman she was. I've heard the stories from my aunts and my mom, and even when she was alive, talking through some of that, like that, to see her become the woman that she was, and to continue even on her deathbed. I mean, to listen to her worship music, to look around at her daughters and her family, like to go with the grace that she did. I had never saw anyone who approached life as tough as she had it the way that she
Mm-hmm.
did. So I think her approach to like and how she remained perseverant and resilient through her hardships, that stays with me till this day and it impacted me. And I'm sure it pretty impacted some of my cousins and my family members, but it impacts how we as strong women have continued to work through hardships in life and how we
Mm-hmm.
approach it because it's life is going to be life. It's going to be tough,
Mm-hmm.
and it is tough for women specifically. And I feel like if it is in how you approach it, how you're willing to remain resilient, not accepting of any abuses and stuff like that, but remain resilient through the hardships. Like that's like how you approach it is probably key.
Mm-hmm.
That's how she impacted me personally. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I was actually going to ask you about that, about how did her story inspire you, right? And how you now walk in your journey and how that impacted you. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's evident, right, that it impacted you so much that now every time you have those struggles or
Mm-hmm.
you may encounter somebody else maybe with that same struggle, is that now you can say, I knew a woman
Mm-hmm.
who
Yeah.
inspired me to that extent that
Mm-hmm.
if it maybe did not affect me, meaning like you speaking to them, if
Yeah.
maybe it did not affect me in that way that affected her, but that I can spread her grace and I
Mm-hmm.
can spread her resilience and I can spread her love and compassion that
Yeah.
she had and I can speak on it
Yeah.
to that other person who may need it
Yeah.
because you were able to visually see that impact, not just hear about it, but you
Mm-hmm.
visually were in that moment. And it speaks volumes for sure on those impacts. My grandmother from my father's side had 11 kids.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, she just deserves an applause, period, for
For
having
11
11
children.
kids. And my
Lord.
grandfather, her husband, technically had 15 because he had 4 kids before he had the 11 kids with her,
Mm.
with his first marriage.
The times are different.
So my grandfather's a whole nother conversation, clearly. But my grandmother, I'm like, wow, this woman, and my grandfather died at a young age. I want to say he was either in his 40s or 50s. Um, and my grandmother, I mean, she took care of these 11 kids by herself. She stood single. She never got into another relationship. I mean, I would say that would probably be hard to get into another relationship with 11
Yeah.
kids, hard for somebody to come into the picture and say, "Oh, I'm fine with helping you take care of 11
Mm-hmm.
kids."
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the older siblings took charge of their duties and they instilled and inspired the other children. But she has always been this woman who, and that's where I get a lot of my holistic belief in.
Mm-hmm.
She was always about natural healing, always
Mm-hmm.
about, taking care of your body, always about having your own stuff in the backyard and
Mm-hmm.
being able to have your lemons with your water and eating
Yeah.
certain things and taking care of things naturally. Whenever something was going on with me, she'd be like, "Oh, I need you to drink some honey or I need you to do this," but it was always everything as natural as possible.
Yeah.
And I love that about her. So all those things are left with us, as to how we go about that and about how we go about life, period.
Mm-hmm.
Now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a person now who I try to do things as natural as possible. I try not to put medicine, and then it's evident because then when I do take medicine
Mm-hmm.
that I normally wouldn't, it takes a toll on my body. It affects me
Yeah.
to the point where I'm probably drowsy or whatever the case may be because my body is so sensitive
Mm-hmm.
to the medicine because I'm not used to
Yeah.
putting medicine to my body.
Yeah.
Um, but considering the theme, right? So sticking with Women's History Month, other than the qualities that you mentioned, um, what are maybe some other qualities that make her a remarkable and enduring figure, um, leaving that lasting imprint in your
Mm-hmm.
life? Um, and I know this woman was an imprint. She definitely made an impression in your life because
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we first met. Well, I don't know exactly when we talked about it, but we talked about it eventually. And I think it was for your birthday or something. And that I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to gift her with a picture of her grandmother that she didn't have.
Oh yeah.
And I found this picture and I forgot where the picture was that I don't even know where I got it from.
But yeah.
Um, but you didn't have it. And then I found it and I gave it to you. And you're just like, oh, like I
Mm-hmm.
love that. And so it's those moments that really that we realize that it really does make a difference for us.
Oh yeah. I do remember when I was going through a dark time in my life. I never I never like to go to grave sites because I feel like what's the point? They're not there anymore and
Hmm.
I just couldn't
I
do it.
agree.
So there was a time where I was going through a lot and I kind of felt like, man, I don't know who I am. I feel a little lost. And at the same time, I was feeling the pressures like I am bearing this woman's name who has been such a huge figure in our family. And I just kind of felt like I need to go to her gravesite and I just need to talk to her like I was talking to my grandmother. And so I went and I'm just sitting there like, Grandma, I don't know what to do right now. I don't know who I
Hmm.
am. I want to, just kind of bearing my all as if she was there. And I think it was a moment that I realized like she's never going to like I'm always grasping for these memories because I don't ever want her to get lost in my
Hmm.
memories. And I was like, okay, if I go to this gravesite, I definitely was gonna break down, and that I
Hmm.
did. But I also wanted to keep her memory alive.
Hmm.
And that's how much she impacted me. Like in a lot of issues that I've had in my life, I would think back, like, man, my grandmother was the main example for me to be
Hmm.
a strong woman, to be a strong woman of faith, to all these things that were good about her that I've literally carried into my life and my adulthood and how I approach things because that's what she modeled for me. And so that for me, the heaviness was like, how do I carry this woman's legacy on? Bearing her name, I want to make
Hmm.
sure that I'm carrying her legacy on whatever that looks like in my life. But yeah, I definitely. I think her legacy does continue to live on in her nieces
Hmm.
and in myself and her daughters, but I definitely want to keep her memory, her legacy alive because
Hmm.
after all, I am carrying her name.
Hmm. And a beautiful name it is.
Yeah. So,
I always think about, growing up, it was always instilled into me when I was younger, before I knew any better. They would say like, don't celebrate el Día de los Muertos.
mm,
They would make it seem as though this was to celebrate the devil, to celebrate evil things. And it wasn't until the movie Coco. Is it Coco, right? It's Coco.
oh, yeah.
Um, that showed me a completely different idea or perspective
Hmm.
of it, and it's the correct perspective of
Hmm.
celebrating their legacy.
Hmm.
So when I seen that movie, I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, that's how we continue to carry them alive with us, for them to be with us at all times. Is speaking
Hmm.
about them, it makes me emotional, but
Hmm.
speaking about them and having a picture of them and telling these stories, the stories
Hmm.
that others are not talking about, because it is important. It's important for us to
Hmm.
be able to just keep them alive, keep their memory
Yeah.
alive, so that they're not forgotten in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So it was really, really beautiful, that story, and how they filmed it and how they did all that and how they explained the true story behind it,
Hmm.
um and for us to really understand that that's what we do, that's what we do in life and celebration. And so my grandmother from my mom's side never believed in going to bury somebody and mourning them.
Hmm.
So when she died, obviously we went and we had to bury her. But when we came back, I remember saying, this is not what she would want. She wouldn't want us mourning her. She wouldn't want us crying. She would want us to be celebrating her life.
Yeah.
And at that time, my brother was younger, my nieces were younger. There were more younger kids in our family, not a lot of adults. And so I didn't want them to continue to be so sad while we
Hmm.
were there. And I said, come on, let's go. And I got a whole bunch of water guns and filled them up. And I'm like, we're going to go do something fun. Like, I was like, we
Hmm.
celebrate her. This is what she would want. She would want to be happy, to enjoy life, because she lived her life. She lived a full life, and she lived as much as she could and did as much as she could for the time that she could. Um, and she understood that, and we accepted it, and she accepted it. And it's unfortunate, when our family members die. But at the same time, when they have done fulfilled that full life, it's like, that they were there for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. My grandmother's funeral was definitely an entire weekend celebration. It, it was definitely quite I think for her funeral, I never seen a funeral quite like it. That was the
Hmm.
first time that I saw that people were really coming from all over and the church was packed out for my grandma. I was like, I didn't even know she knew these people. Like
Yeah.
this many people are, or even like if this many people impacted her, or or
Hmm.
impacted she impacted them and family members I didn't know. Like it was crazy. It was literally a 3-day thing celebrating her, people talking and it was crazy. It was the first I'm like, man, I didn't know grandma knew all these people.
What?
They came out of nowhere. But yeah, so yeah, it was definitely quite the celebration for her. Also sad.
And
Yeah.
and that's beautiful, right? Because I mean, I've been a part of individuals who have died in my family, who, instead of being those joyful moments like that, instead of people celebrating, it was the complete opposite, where barely anybody showed up, or
Mm-hmm.
caused a lot of drama once that
Mm-hmm.
person died amongst family members. And so it's
What would
evident
happen?
there the impact that both of those individuals played, right? You have your
Yeah.
grandmother who had 3 days of celebration, and that means that she made this
Mm-hmm.
huge impact on all these people, or that people just remember her for something or some way,
Mm-hmm.
shape, or form that it could have just been her smile. It could have just
Yeah.
been her hi. It could have just been her that maybe one day she gave that one person a cup of coffee
To
that
fed them.
may have just needed it in that one moment.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we don't realize how much one moment
Mm-hmm.
can change our lives, that it means so much to us. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that all those individuals showed up, and then you have other family members or other individuals who there's all this drama and there's this fighting, and nothing
Mm-hmm.
gets squared away, and it's just a lot of healing that has to be done because there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
brokenness due to things that were done, by that
Yeah.
family member who passed away. And so it's evident on both sides.
Yeah.
And so it's making sure. I think one thing that we can leave out of this conversation, and I'd like to hear too, what would you say to others, of, maybe to our younger generation, I guess I would say, or anybody that has their grandparents still alive,
Mm-hmm.
um, is maybe some words of advice, or maybe something that they can go off of to say, okay, I need to change this because
Mm-hmm.
my grandparent is still alive. I haven't had the opportunity to have that type of relationship for some way, shape, or form for some reason.
Yeah.
It's always better late than never,
Mm-hmm.
so that you never walk out with any regrets.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I do remember, I think it was months, maybe months to a year before my grandma passed, that my mom literally turned to me because I was a teenager and, you know, living my teen life. And my mom turned to me and she was like, make sure you go visit your grandma. And I'm like,
Mm,
okay. And she said, make sure you go visit your grandma, like when you can, make time to, be with her because she's not going to be here. She's not going
hmm
to be here forever. And so I don't know what it was in that moment when she said that, something clicked for me. And I'm like, yeah, I need to go spend time with my grandma.
hmm
And so after she said that, I made sure that even though I was taking the bus, like I would make sure that I went to my grandmother's house to make sure that I saw her and spent time with her and kind of took advantage of my time with her. And before you know it, she did get diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and they gave her
Wow.
6 months and she literally lived the 6 months to the T. And in that span of time, I made sure that I soaked up everything about her. I get emotional too.
Mm,
She was also a worshiper, and I mean, worshipers run in my family, but she had a notebook of worship songs that were her favorite, and
mm,
she would forget them. She was getting to the stage where she was just forgetting things, and she had a notebook, and she sat on her couch, and she would go through the notebook, and she would turn the pages and do worship song after worship song. And I remember being literally at her feet, like
mm,
literally in front of the couch, the recliner by her feet, and just listening to her, like just watching her and hearing her sing her worship music. And I mean, stuff like that is imprinted in my mind for the rest of my life. And I'm glad that I took the chance to really kind of soak those moments in because it's true when you have your grandparents, and I don't know, it's different for everybody. Everybody has
hmm
different relationship with their parents. It may not, or grandparents
hmm
may not be good. And so there's a reason.
hmm
But I think when you have your grandparents in your life, take advantage because they're not like nobody,
hmm
no, like tomorrow's not promised for anyone. And so you don't know when their last day here is. And I think there's so much wisdom, there's so much history, there's so much to learn from your grandparents. And I think if you just take the time out to really soak that all in, you'll never regret that time because it's precious moments that you will carry for the rest of your life. Uh,
hmm
so, yeah.
Yeah, it's our and for all those who may not, maybe the person who inspired them is not a grandparent, right? Maybe it's a
Mhm.
parent, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's an aunt or
Mhm.
uncle, whoever that person is, regardless of who it is just making sure that we're taking time out with those individuals in our that are loves in our lives,
Mhm.
um, that mean something to us. Because, like you said, we don't always have great relationships with certain individuals
Mhm.
in our lives, and that's okay too,
Mhm.
but whoever you do have a relationship with, is making sure that we're taking that time for them. And for the listeners out there too, would love to say too that maybe if you're not speaking to somebody for something that's so minimal, something
Mhm.
that you can forgive, if you can think about losing that person and that it would affect you if you lost that person today,
Mhm.
and that you could have and you would have regretted saying sorry or regretted just letting that go,
Mhm.
just to have them here one more time, not to take that not to lose any more time.
Mhm.
Don't lose any more time. Just get over it, get past it, and move on. And keep that relationship, because as I heard before, is like sometimes we can be here for breakfast and by lunchtime we're gone.
Mhm.
So making sure that we are keeping that. But I don't want to end on a sad note for our listeners are out there, but just really
Yeah.
hoping that this impacts somebody in their lives, that maybe is speaking to somebody that maybe
Mhm.
there is somebody in their life, whether it's a female or male, that they really kind of have just been wanting to say, I'm sorry, or just get past whatever it is, because it's too short. Life is too short. We don't
Mhm.
have time for that. And as the world is continuing to change, there's so much going on in the world as well. We don't have time for the hate. We don't have time for um, the disagreements that are about stupid things, stuff that you can get over. Holding on to grudges is not good, even just for our souls, just even for
Mhm.
ourselves. Holding on to something that happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20
Mhm.
years ago. I do believe there are certain individuals that, yes, you have to remove them out of your life, that they no longer serve a purpose in your life. And yep, you remove them. Absolutely. You have no issues, no longer have issues with them. You'd want nothing to do with them, but they belong on that outside, right, of our circle. Um, but the individuals that belong in our circle, making sure that we're taking the time to do that. Um, and so, in honor of Women's History Month, I want to make sure that we are grateful, celebrate your family members, celebrate those in women or males
Mhm.
that are inspiring you in your life, and that continue to, they're the ones who are going to pass on the baton, right?
Mhm.
So, since they're the ones passing on the baton, making sure that you're there in that race and holding your hand out to take the baton, because then we're next. We're the
Mhm.
ones who are leaving our legacy on. And sometimes we may, and this made me think of this earlier, sometimes now as parents, right, we're experiencing
Mhm.
parenthood for the first time ever. This is not something we've ever done before. We don't have, this wasn't in our job description prior.
Yep.
We learn to be parents now, and I told my kids, they're now like, listen, I'm gonna make mistakes. This
Mhm.
is the first time me being in parenthood, and I'm going to make those mistakes, and I hope you can forgive me, and let's just work with that. And so that, me now being a parent, then makes me think about my parents. Okay, that's, so
Mhm.
if I it's my first time being a parent, then it was her first time being a parent, and she's made those mistakes, or he's made those mistakes in raising me, because they were first time parents too,
Yep.
and they're raising us. But I think that's when we have grandchildren, and
Mhm.
that's where our grandparents are so influential to us, is
Yep.
that it's their second chance, it's our second
Mhm.
chance to all the wrong that we did with our children, is then
Mhm.
instilling the right moments with our
Yeah.
grandchildren.
Yeah.
And I think that's why our grandparents are even more influential in that way, or more inspiring,
Yeah.
even more so, or impactful.
Yeah, it's definitely a special season of grandparents' life where they get to kind of redeem some of that time,
Mm-hmm.
be able to form relationships with their grandchildren that they may have wished that they could have done earlier. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It has been a
Yeah.
great, exciting to see you. Of course, your beautiful face, my bestie. And I hope to see you soon. I know it's my turn to come see you. So I'm
Yes,
hoping that we can do that.
it's definitely your
Listeners,
turn.
listeners, ignore her tone.
Your
But thank
turn.
you so much to everybody for listening to Cafecito Tempranito con Tayrin. And stay tuned for the next few Sundays as we continue to talk about Women's History Month, about how other women have inspired them, or any other topic surrounding Women's History Month. Have a great day.